At the very end of Yaakov Avinu's life, the message comes to his son Yosef that your father has taken ill, he's on his deathbed. Yosef, who is then the viceroy of Mitzrayim, takes his two sons, Ephraim and Menashe, he brings them in for a final bracha. And the pasuk is clear when it says, the Einei Yisrael kavdu mizoken. Yaakov couldn't yet at that point see very clearly, his eyes were weak. Lo yochel liros, he couldn't really see clearly. Vayeger shesam alav, Yosef brought his two sons to Yaakov. Vayishak lehem Yaakov, kissed them. Vayichabek lehem, and he hugged them. The Sforno is bothered by why is it that Yaakov Avinu now is hugging them, is he kissing them? He's not bearing farewell to them, he's about to give them a bracha. Why does he hug them? Why does he kiss them? So the Sforno explains, Kedei shetitabek nafsho behem, so that his nefesh should cling to them, v'tichal aleim berchoso, and his bracha should have effect on them. Yaakov Avinu wanted to give a very powerful bracha. The more emotion, the more intensity that's in the bracha, the more powerful, because he wanted to give a blessing with all of his heart. He brought his two grandsons there, Ephraim and Menashe. He hugged them, he kissed them, thereby to increase his attachment, to increase his love, so that when he would give the bracha, when he give that final blessing, it would be with the utmost emotion, with intense fervor, so that the bracha should have more effect. And this is a very fine concept. The only problem with this Sforno is that it seems to be the exact opposite of what we understand. Meaning as follows. Normally, if a grandfather feels a sense of love to his grandson, what does he do? He hugs him, he kisses him. Yet the Sforno is saying the exact opposite. It's because Yaakov wanted to feel love for his grandchildren, because he wanted to give that blessing with more intense fervor. He needed to feel more, therefore he hugged them and kissed them. Meaning to say, the Sforno is saying, because he wanted to feel love, therefore he hugged and kissed them. Isn't it the opposite? Don't you normally hug and kiss because you feel love? Yet the Sforno is telling us quite the opposite, because he wanted to feel the love, that's why he hugged them and kissed them. And I believe there is a major yesod, a major concept for us to learn from this Sforno. And it affects much of our relationships, and certainly affects the way a person goes out looking for his or her bashert, dating. But to understand the concept, we have to take another step. And you'll excuse me for mentioning something that I mentioned at length and discussed at length actually in Shmuz number 62, and that's a story of Amnon and Tamar. David HaMelech, when he was already the king of Yisrael, had a number of wives, and he had children from each of them. His oldest son was Amnon, and Amnon was slated to be the next king, that was the heir apparent, and that was the way it was supposed to unfold. From another wife, David also had children. Those children were named Tamar and her brother Avshalom. The pasuk describes Tamar as very, very beautiful. And apparently at some point Amnon fell in love with his half-sister, and he propositioned her. Amnon went over to Tamar and propositioned her, and she said, "We can't, brother and sister, it's forbidden, please don't, please don't, please don't." Apparently it became an obsession. Amnon became obsessed with her. He would wake up in the morning, all day long, he would think about her. He couldn't get her out of her thoughts. He had a tremendous love for her. And eventually what happened was that Amnon raped her. And no sooner does he take her than his love seems to disappear. So this pasuk says, "Vayisne Amnon sina gedola ma'od." Amnon hated her with a huge, passionate hatred. Ki gedola sina shesina, the hatred that he hated her with was greater than the love that he used to love her with. And the Barbanel explains that this is the way of a person who commits a lowly act. The hatred that he feels will be greater than the love that he originally felt. Now let's try to understand this pasuk. Let's try to understand how the Abarbanel learns it. This reality seems impossible to relate to. Amnon is so in love with Tamar, He's so totally taken with her that he realizes he may well lose the throne. He's the firstborn. He's supposed to be the king. He knows the danger involved. She warns him, but he's so taken with her. He's so madly, passionately in love that I can't resist, and he lives with her. And no sooner than he lives with her than the exact opposite. Not only doesn't he love her anymore, he now hates her with a hatred that was even greater than his love. This makes no sense. The man was lovesick, so completely absorbed with her beauty, who she was. He lives with her, and then the opposite. Not only doesn't he love her anymore, but now he hates her. What's pshat? And to understand what's pshat in this pasuk and what's pshat in this Abravanel, we have to understand that there are certain forces in the world that Western civilization has little understanding of. And let me explain to you what I mean. In 1597, Shakespeare wrote the famous Romeo and Juliet. Now, if you remember from your high school English class, the story doesn't have such a happy ending. Romeo is this young man, Juliet is a 13-year-old woman, and they both happen to belong to warring families. The families that they're each members of are at war with each other, and they happen to meet at a party. Romeo sees Juliet and falls madly, passionately in love. He looks at her, she looks at him, and you could hear the violins playing in the background. They fall instantly into mad, passionate love. They begin speaking right after the party. They agree to marry, and that's the plan. As things work out, Romeo gets banished from the kingdom, and Juliet's father says, well, we have to find you another, and he decides that she should marry Paris, and in fact, that's the plan. Romeo is out of the country. Juliet now has to marry this other person. Juliet certainly doesn't want to go along with it, so she goes to the friar, the priest of the area, and asks for advice. The friar has a plan. He says, you'll take this potion. This potion will put you to sleep for 42 hours. They'll think you're dead. And once they think you're dead, obviously the marriage to this other fellow is going to be off, and then you'll be able to go and elope with your Romeo. She, in fact, takes the potion, and she, in fact, drinks it. The friar all along plans to tell Romeo the plan, but somehow it is that he can't get the message to Romeo. In any case, Juliet drinks this potion. She's unconscious. The families assume she's dead. They take her to the tomb of the family, and that's where she is. Romeo hears that Juliet has died. He goes there and sees her dead, and he commits suicide. No sooner does he die from his own drinking that potion than Juliet comes out of her sleep. She sees that her beloved has died. She takes a dagger and stabs herself, and they both are dead. They both committed suicide. This little vignette, which again was one of Shakespeare's great works, is a part of Western culture. Throughout thousands of years, this concept of love at first sight. He looks at her, she looks at him, and wow. And not only is it an accepted part of the culture, Hollywood obviously has made it into an entire industry, and all the romantic love stories and all of the things that go with it. Scientists now even have a study to discuss it. A professor of Syracuse University has a paper where he times how quickly a person can fall in love. He says a person can fall in love in 0.2 of a second. You look in her eyes, she looked in your eyes, and in 0.2 of a second, you're madly, deeply, passionately in love. And I'd like to ask a very significant question. Is there such a thing? Is there such a thing as love at first sight? So I'd like to share with you something very, very important to realize. There are definite effects on a person. There are definite changes in a person, but it's not love. It's something else altogether, something very important, something that Hashem created for a specific purpose, but it sure ain't love. And I'd like to explain to you what it is. But to do that, let's focus on something very, very interesting about the human condition. The Medrash Rabbah tells us that a certain matron, a certain Roman noblewoman came to Rav Yossi Bar Chalafta, and apparently she was learning about Judaism, and she asked him the following question: since Hashem created the world, what does He do? He created the whole world already. Everything's here. Since that time till now, what does He do? Says Rav Yossi Bar Chalafta, what Hashem does is Hashem is mezavig zivugim. Hashem makes matches, the daughter of this one to this one, so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so to so-and-so, and that's what Hashem does all day long. Says this matron to Rav Yossi Bar Chalafta, what? That's what it takes Hashem to do? Why, I could do that. That's not a big deal. There's nothing to that. Rav Yossi Bar Chalafta says to this woman, if to you it seems simple, you should just know that to Hashem it's kasher mikriyas yamsuf, more difficult than splitting the sea. At which point this woman left. She took it as a challenge. She was quite wealthy. The Medrash tells us she had 100 slaves, 100 men slaves, and 100 women slaves. That day she went home and she started making matches. You to you, you to you, you to you. She matched up all 1,000 slaves. And the next day she came back and she saw something a little out of sync. This guy was walking around with a black eye. This guy was limping. This guy had a broken arm. And she said, what happened? What happened? That woman you gave me, that woman you gave me, that guy you gave me. On and on. They were fighting, yelling, screaming. She comes running back to Rav Yossi Bar Chalafta. Toraschem emes, your Torah is true. Elokeichem emes, your God is true. Says Rav Yossi Bar Chalafta, that's what I was saying to you. If to you it seems simple to match up him with her, you should know to Hashem it's quite difficult, and that's what Hashem does. Now, this Medrash shares with us many points. The particular point that I'd like to take from it is a very simple one, and that is to find the corresponding man and woman that fit together properly is not that simple. You know, everyone likes to play shadchan, everyone likes to be the matchmaker. I can match him up, just trust me, rely on me, I can match him up. If you start studying marriage, and you study what makes a marriage successful, what you'll quickly find is it's not simple at all. When my wife and I were first married, we made a little study. My parents had a circle of about 8 couples they were very good friends with, and we studied each of the marriages. We studied each couple to see what we could learn from it, what we could gain from it, etc. And I don't know who it was, either my wife or I first, but we both agreed that not a single one of those matches were correct. If we were the shadchan, we never would have put them together. He was too outspoken, she was too quiet, she was too intellectual, he wasn't. Not a single one of them was matched up. In fact, the only one that was close to being matched properly was the one couple that in fact was having marital strife, marital conflict. And my wife and I, at that young point in our marriage, reached a very important observation. And that is to find the corresponding man that matches the woman properly is not simple at all. Each human being has many, many strengths and many, many weaknesses. But you see, my strengths have to correlate to her weaknesses, her strengths to my weaknesses, and it's got to fit together like a hand and glove. And if you would like to try to believe that you can find the right person for you, I'd like to share with you, I doubt that you can. And I'll share with you why. How many people can honestly say, I know myself. I know my needs, I know my strengths, I know my talents, I know what I'll need to make me a complete person. I have not yet met a young person who fundamentally understands the essence of them. And I haven't yet met too many older people as well. But here's really the point. If you'd like to know how unlikely it is that you could find the right person for you, I'll give you a simple challenge. Imagine I tell you, here's the challenge. I want you to pick a roommate, and this roommate is going to be your roommate for the next 4 years. Very simple. You have one choice, but you have to stick with this choice for 4 years. How likely do you think it is that you'll be able to pick somebody that you'll still get along with in 4 years? Remember, roommates, it means you're spending a lot of time together, night, morning, whatever, How likely do you think it is? Now, the truth is most of us probably feel pretty confident that we could pick a person that we get along with well enough, whose style and temperaments fit ours close enough, that we probably could choose a roommate, and it's probably true. But you see, when a couple get married, they're not roommates. From the moment they get married, they're going to spend everything they do together. How they run their home, how they run their house, how they bring up the children. If he's late, she's embarrassed. If she's a sloppy housekeeper, he's going to suffer. They're together in this thing called life, how they spend their money, where they spend their time, where they vacation. Everything that they do, they're going to do together now as one unit. And here's the problem. To get two human beings together, living in peace and harmony, isn't so simple. Most business partnerships fail. 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, 20 years for sure. But you're not asking this person to be your business partner. You're asking them to share your entire life together. But what makes it far more difficult is that men and women are so fundamentally different. They have different desires, different interests, different things that they find fun. We were newly married, and it was Bein Hazmanim, and I asked my wife if she wanted to spend some time, why don't we go fishing? So my wife was a good sport. She took along something to read, and after about 20 minutes, she said to me, are we done? Are we done now? That was the last time we went fishing. If you look at boys and girls, they do vastly different things for fun. They have different interests, different things that they're focused on, and they have entirely different emotional systems. So here's the problem. You ask a young man and a young woman who are brought up in totally different homes, who have different ways of doing things, different ways of approaching things. By temperament, by nature, they're vastly different because men and women are so different. And you ask them to spend their entire life together, to complete one another emotionally, psychologically, to form one unit. And if that doesn't sound daunting, let me add one little twist to it. How long do you intend to be married for? Meaning, when you say the words Harei Mekudeshes, or you accept the ring, how long do you intend that marriage to last for? So the answer is a lifetime. And in Mitzvah Hashem, you get married to that person, and that marriage lasts a lifetime. What does a lifetime mean? 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, maybe even more? Well, here's the point. Do you know where you're going to be 20 years from now? Do you know what you're going to be involved in? What will interest you? Do you know how you'll develop? Do you understand what needs you'll have then? So even if you think you're wise enough now to say, I know what I need, and even if you think you're wise enough to know the opposite gender, so you can find the corresponding weaknesses for your strength for your weaknesses, and even if you think that you could choose, you don't know where you're going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And the idea of choosing a mate, the proper mate, obviously, is pretty silly. But it's not just that it's a difficult choice to make, it's that living together as a couple is a very, very difficult thing to do. Now, clearly Hashem wants marriages to succeed. So there are two things that Hashem did to make that happen. Number one, Hashem chose for you the right person, the perfect person, the ideal match for you. You and your spouse will fit together like hand and glove because the creator of the heavens and earth, who formed you and your spouse, says you two fit together perfectly. So that's the first thing that Hashem did. But in addition to that, there was a whole other part that Hashem had to put in. You see, Hashem created many, many forces in the human to allow a marriage to succeed. It's not enough to have him and her match perfectly, because living together as a married couple is a very difficult thing. I have my way, she has her way, I like it this way, she likes it that way. And invariably, we human beings have our idiosyncrasies, we have our quirks, we have our things that go on. And for a marriage to succeed in harmony and peace should be impossible. But because Hashem wants it to succeed, Hashem created certain tools. And the first tool is something called infatuation. Infatuation is a very real effect. It's when she looks in his eyes, he looks in her eyes, and they each get that glassy look. Ooh. You could almost feel the chemicals go off. It's like there's a capsule in the chest that releases the chemicals, and you could see him get glassy-eyed, and he's, ooh. That is something called infatuation. Infatuation is a very real state. Scientists now study it. It affects the neurotransmitters, the brain chemistry, the dopamine, serotonin, the adrenaline level. In fact, they say that if you study the brain chemistry, you'll see that infatuation has a similar effect to cocaine use. When a person snorts cocaine, they get high. The same centers of the brain are stimulated, and it's a similar effect. The person falls into a state of infatuation, and woo, they're gone. Now, I'd like to share with you why it is that Hashem created this state of infatuation. Infatuation is a very delusional state. In that state, she's perfect, he's perfect, and will always feel this way forever. Again, as a personal example, I'll share with you what I find very interesting. My wife is one of the sharpest people I know. And we were newly engaged, and I heard her on the phone with a friend, and it sounded something like this. I know it can't be. I know no one's perfect, but I'm telling you, he's perfect. Now, I'm standing there saying to myself, I'm not the one to tell you this, but you're in for a rude awakening. And by the way, my wife no longer says the word perfect. Baruch Hashem, we're very happily married, but I'd like to share with you what was happening then. As a kala, she was infatuated. And when those chemicals flood the brain, there's this sense of mild euphoria, sort of this sense of, ooh, and he is perfect. It's not that she doesn't see the flaws in a chassan. They don't exist. And even if you point them out, it doesn't matter. I love him. It's okay. And the reason why Hashem created this state called infatuation is to allow a couple to begin the process, because it is very difficult, and each of us have our strengths and our weaknesses. Each of us have our flaws, and if we were very, very sober coming into a marriage, it would be very difficult. So Hashem created this state called infatuation. The chemicals go off. Woo, she's perfect, he's perfect. Both of them want to go sing on the rooftop at night, and they're in that state. However, I'd like to share with you something very, very eye-opening. I deal with hundreds of couples. I've never done a formal study, but I would say about 60%, somewhere around 60% have the following reaction. It might be 6 months after the marriage, maybe a year after the marriage. Either he or she, or sometimes both, wake up one morning and say the following words. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I can't believe it. I made the biggest mistake in my life. I married the wrong one. And I'd like to share with you, they made a mistake, but not marrying the wrong one. They mistook infatuation for love. You see, infatuation is a state that Hashem created with a very specific purpose, to begin the marriage, to begin the process. But infatuation has a shelf life. It disappears. The job of a couple is to then build the real bond of connection, the real bond of love, and that's something that doesn't come quickly at all. That's something that takes a tremendous amount of work. And many couples walk down that aisle thinking that they're madly, deeply, passionately in love, and that state will last forever, and they got it dead wrong. They're not in love. They're in a state of infatuation mixed with lust and desire, and they feel it'll last forever, but it won't. It will end. Much like the sulfur on a kitchen match, you strike that match and it flames up. The sulfur has a particular purpose. It's to start the flame, but then the wood has to catch. Infatuation is instinctual, it's natural, it comes easy, but it has a shelf life. It ends 6 months or a year, and then it's gone. It dissipates like smoke. And the job of a couple who wishes to be successful is to work on the real bond of love, the real connection. And now I'd like to share with you the key distinctions between infatuation and love. Number one, love creates a desire to give. When you love someone, you want to give to them. Infatuation creates a desire to take. I want her. I need to have her. And if you listen to the words of the poets, when they describe what they call love, you see words that have nothing to do with giving to that person, nothing to do with being concerned for that person's benefit or good, has to do with the fact that I need her, I couldn't stop thinking about her, I had to have her, I. Infatuation is a state of desire, lust, the sort of a release of those chemicals. It feels like it's going to last forever. It feels like it's going to be there. It is not love. Love causes me to want to give, to take care of that other person. Infatuation causes me to desire that person. True love is based on a bond of connection, of caring, of respect, of looking at that individual and asking what are their needs, what could I do for them. But the first difference between infatuation and love is that love creates a desire to give, infatuation creates a desire to take. But there's another difference. And the next difference is very, very important to recognize. And that is that infatuation is instant. It takes but a moment. Sometimes it's on a first date. Sometimes it's not till the 8th date. Sometimes it happens right away. Sometimes it takes a few winks and a few smiles. But when it happens, whoo! He's gone, she's gone, they're infatuated. Infatuation is instant. Love isn't. Love takes years and years of giving, of taking care of putting someone else's needs before my own. Now Hashem gave us various tools and Hashem gave us various things to help build that. One is infatuation, the other is desire, another is physical acts, intimacy. But at the end of the day, all of those are tools to build love. Love is that sense of caring, deep connection, and it takes an awful lot of work. Number one, infatuation comes and it really takes over, but it's something that doesn't last at all. Number two, infatuation gives you the desire to take, not to give. And number three, infatuation is instant. Love takes a lot of work. And if you'd like to understand the key distinctions between infatuation and love, it's totally a different emotion, totally a different experience. And most of the people who write about love, the movies that are made about love, and the culture that talks about love at first sight has nothing to do with love. When a couple is married for 10 years, for 20 years, when a couple are really dedicated to each other, long after the infatuation has passed, even after the desire is no longer so strong, the bond of love is real, and that bond of love is the essence of a successful marriage. If you'd like to see an illustration of this, I think Amnon is the classic example. He did not love Tamar. He deeply desired her. He lusted for her. Maybe he was infatuated with her, love at first sight, but he didn't love her. He wanted to take her. He didn't want to give to her. He wasn't concerned for her good. He deeply desired her, and he gave up his kingdom for it. But no sooner did he fulfill his passion than instantly he recoiled because he didn't love her. He had a desire for her. Once his desire was met, he looked at her and said, "Ugh, what have I done? I've given up everything. I've given up my life for this ugly, disgusting thing." And he hated her. How could he hate when he loved her? The answer is he didn't love her. He desired her. He was infatuated with her. And once the desire was met, he went back to the other state. In fact, the opposite. He hated her because that's exactly what it was. And if you'd like to understand Yaakov Avinu, was a very simple thing. Here were his grandchildren, and he wanted to give them a bracha. And there's no question that he had tremendous joy in his heart. This was his favorite son, Yosef, who he didn't see for 22 years. He loved Yosef more than all the other brothers. And these were his children. They were true Talmidei Chachamim, true lineage that was going to carry on. And he loved them, but he felt there could be more. He wanted to give a bracha with the totality of his heart, with all of his fervor. So he did a physical act, hugged them, kissed them, because by doing that, it increased the love. And in a marriage, one of the things that's very important to increase the love is physical intimacy. It's physical togetherness. But the point is that real love requires a tremendous amount of work. What Yaakov Avinu was doing was bringing them close to increase the love that he felt for them, because he wanted to feel more love so his bracha could be greater. And the physical acts that a person does causes more love. It won't cause more infatuation, quite the opposite. But it will cause more of a real connection of love, and that's exactly why he did what he did. Now, that I believe is a very fine introduction to the sugya of dating. Why? Because whether we like to admit it or not, we are horribly affected by Western culture's understanding of marriage, Western culture's understanding of dating. And I cannot tell you how many young men, how many young women I speak to, and they say the following: I can't say yes. I just don't feel it. I just don't feel it. And I'll ask them the question: do you enjoy her company? Yes. Do you look forward to the dates? Yes. Do you have a sort of common language and you just sort of work together very well and you feel very comfortable? Yes. What's the problem? I don't know. I'm not. And I'd like to finish the sentence for them: I'm not in love. And many young men and more young women have this attitude that if I'm not in love, I can't get, how can I get married? How can I marry this person if I'm not in love with them? So I'd like to share with you one very simple observation. If love is the criteria that you're going to use to choose a spouse, I almost guarantee you're going to fail. Why? Because love takes 10 years, 20 years, or even if you tell me 5 years after marriage, maybe. But you can't love a person until you've been with them, until you live with them, until you gave to them, until you really spent a significant part of your life together. Love isn't instant. Love doesn't just happen. It's when you give, when you do things together as a unit, when you live together, then you're as a couple going through life. That's what builds that bond of love. But if you say, I'm not getting married until I'm in love, guess what? You're going to fail. Because you can't be in love. The only thing you can be is infatuated. But that's the danger. Do you know the only couples that get me really nervous are the ones who are sure? I am sure. And I knew it from the third date that she was the right one. Wow, I just felt something. Wow. And all I do is I think about her and I can't get her out of my mind. And I'm like, those are the couples that get me nervous. Why? Because those are the couples that are infatuated. But infatuation is those chemicals that go off in your brain and they blind you. You become deaf, dumb, and excuse my expression, stupid. You no longer have sight to see. And if you'll tell a guy, well, do you ever notice that she does this and this? Nah. It won't bother me. It's fine. And I'll feel this way forever and ever until he gets married. The infatuation wears off. And then he says, whoa, what did I get myself into? Love is not a criteria for selecting a mate. It is something that comes long after marriage. And if your selection criteria is, I'm not getting married until I'm in love, I got some bad news for you. You're not going to get married. The only thing that could happen is you could become infatuated, but that's the worst criteria to use. Why? Because infatuation means you're not looking at the person, you're not assessing anything, but we get along so well. Of course you get along so well. You're both drugged up. But what happens when the drugs wear off? How tolerant are you going to be of his sarcastic sense of humor? How tolerant are you going to be about the fact that she's always late? You're no longer judging. You're no longer even asking yourself, is this the right one for me or not? Because you're madly, deeply, passionately in infatuation. And it is a very, very scary thought. And many people make a fundamental mistake. Women, far more than men, will say something like, well, if I'm not infatuated, you want me to have a loveless marriage? You want me to just marry any guy and have a marriage without love? One of the great lies that Hollywood fosters upon us is the mistake to think that the state of infatuation grows up and becomes love. It doesn't. Infatuation is a state. Love is a different state. Infatuation lasts for 6 months, for a year, and it disappears. Real love, that connection, that bonding, is something that takes a lot of work. Infatuation doesn't grow up and become true love. Well, maybe in Hollywood, maybe in Western culture, they like to believe it. But of course, the divorce rate in Hollywood doesn't speak so well for its success. 99.9% for first marriages, higher for the second marriages. The point is that it's not that the current feeling of deep, real infatuation is going to become more powerful and more bonded and more connected as we go through life. The feelings that you have now are one state that don't reflect in any real way on the future success of your marriage. I've had many, many couples who are wildly, madly infatuated when they walk down the aisle, and their marriage did not proceed so smoothly. And plenty of couples who were just, they felt right, it was the right one, but they weren't, am I madly, passionately infatuated? No, I mean, I think it's the right one. I enjoy our company, it seems to go right, it seems to be right. And their marriages flourish. Because the real connection in a marriage, the real love in a marriage is something that takes a tremendous amount of work. And this one I'll say, for the ladies, you should know one more step. Let's even say you were right. Let's say you knew that infatuation, and you'll call it love, is the criteria. And I'm not going to get married until I'm in love. You know why? Because that's what I need to be successfully, happily married. So if this guy doesn't cause the bells to go off in my head, if I don't hear the violins playing, I'm not getting engaged to him. I have to be in love to walk down that aisle. Why? Because I know that's what I need for marriage to be successful. Well, I want to share with you a very, very frightening thought. Do you know that a couple can be in love, and I don't even mean infatuation, I mean real love, and they could still get divorced? There are many couples who love each other yet cannot live with each other. And I'd like to explain to you why. Another notion that the Western culture, Hollywood likes to foster on us is that love cures all. Once we were in love, and it was true love, then everything will be fine and wonderful, and everyone will be happily ever after. I would like to share with you, you could be deeply, madly, passionately in love with your husband, and it could still get under your skin day after day, the way he acts, the way he speaks. And you could still say things that bother him incredibly, and you can end up fighting and screaming, yelling, and getting divorced, even though you really love this person. You see, the success of a marriage is based on a number of things. Love certainly is a vital component in a successful marriage. But learning how to be successfully married, learning how to get along with another person is far more important. And that ability to choose correctly the person not only who you will love, but the person that you can actually get along with, that's your bashert, is a lot more difficult than you think it is. And most people don't realize that it's well beyond the capacity of you. Listen, I'm a smart guy. I can choose. No, you can't. If you think you have the ability to choose the person who's right for you, I'd like to share with you, you're a babe in the woods. I guarantee you only say that if you weren't married. Ask any married couple you know the following question. 2 years after you're married, the person that you're married to now, is it the same person that you went out with? I haven't met a couple yet who tells me absolutely the same person. Again, in my own case, my wife loves me, I love her, we have, Baruch Hashem, a beautiful marriage. I can tell you, bivadayas, the person that I was married to 5 years after we're married, for sure the person I'm married to now was not the person I was dating. Now, obviously, One part is the fact that we both changed. And you can't predict change, but even more than that. When you're on the dates, you're acting in a way, you're trying to be yourself, but everyone's on their best behavior, everyone is nice, everyone's polite, and you don't know what it's like to really live with this person, to get up in the morning when she's a little grouchy, and to put up with her when she's not in the best of moods, to put up with his whatever it may be. And everyone has a sense, well, I could put up with it. I know marriage needs work, but I'll be fine with it until you get married and you find out that it takes a lot more than you realize. And the reality is that we human beings can be intelligent, we can be smart, we can know a lot of things. That doesn't mean we have the capacity to call the shot. So I'd like to share with you some good news and some bad news. Let's say you get serious. You get serious about this fact that I want to find my bashert, but I want to find the right person. So again, I have good news and bad news, and I'll give you the good news first. The good news is that it's the most intuitive, instinctive thing in the world. 40 days before you were born, a baskol came out and said, Bito shel ploni leploni. Right? It's a chazal, it's a Gemara. Gemara tells us 40 days before a man was put into the world, a baskol comes out and says, this is the right match, the perfect match. This is the right person. So it's set, it's easy, most intuitive, instinctive thing in the world. That's the good news. The bad news, you didn't hear the baskol. Very nice. There was a heavenly voice that proclaimed who is the right person for you. You didn't hear it. So here's the problem. How do you know? How do you know that this person is your bashert? This is probably the biggest decision you're going to make in your life. How do you know for sure that this is the right one? So I happen to have a guaranteed, foolproof way to know absolutely that this is your bashert. Would you like to know what it is? It's very simple, and it hasn't failed yet. When you walk your grandchildren down the aisle together with your wife, you now know that she was your bashert. Would you like to know how you know that this person is your bashert? You can't know. There's no way to know. If you could predict the future, you could know. If you were a Navi, you could know. But short of that, there is no way to know absolutely, positively that this is the right person for you. And now we come to that big deal life decision time. How does a person deal with that reality? So I want to share with you a yesod that I believe applies to every big life decision you'll ever make. People go about these decisions totally the wrong way, whether it's getting a particular job, moving to another city, putting your kids in this school or that school. Everyone, when it comes to big deal life decisions, make a fundamental mistake. They think that they're responsible to make the right decision. And guess what? You're not. You can't make the right decision. You're not responsible to make the right decision. You're responsible to make the best decision that you can, given the information that you have, given your knowledge. You can't possibly make the right decision unless you're a Navi. Well, Hashem didn't give you the power of Nevi'us, of prophecy. Therefore, Hashem doesn't expect that from you. What Hashem expects from you is to make the best decision that you can. But the best decision may not be the right decision. You're not responsible to make that. Your job is to use the world in the ways of the world and then rely on Hashem to do the rest. You're responsible to make the best decision you can. How does a person make such a decision like their bashert? There's a very instinctive, very intuitive way. I've said it in a number of other shmuzim. You can read the Finding and Keeping a Soulmate book. There are two parts to it. The paper test and then the bashert test. Paper test is on paper. Do the two line up? Are they looking to live the same kind of life, same kind of lifestyle, bring up the same kind of house? If he wants to learn for 10 years in Kollel and she only shops in Saks Fifth Avenue, we know we're not on the same page. The paper test is in big, broad brushstrokes. In general terms, are they looking to lead the same kind of life? Once you pass the paper test, then you take the bashert test. The bashert test is the most instinctive, intuitive test in the world. You go out, you act yourself, she acts herself, and you see, is there a commonality? Does it just sort of feel right? And do the conversations flow? Is there a certain comfort level? You see, what you're looking for is the right one, the one that your creator deemed to be appropriate. How do you know she's the right one? You just feel it. It feels right. But here's the mistake that most people make. It's not rockets on the 4th of July. It's not, woo, mad, instant, passionate love. Well, but my friend, he got engaged and he was Your friend might have been infatuated. That's not the criteria for selection. What you're looking for is this the right one for me? Is this the one that Hashem determined to be the perfect match for me? How do I know? How do I tell? It's very, very instinctive, very intuitive. You go out, you see, do you look forward to the dates? Do you enjoy our company? Is it going in the right way? There's a certain sense within you that this is the right one. Not that I love him, not that I'm obsessed with him, but I just feel comfortable. I feel right. And when you feel that feeling, that's the sign. Would you like to know what that bas kol is about? Rav Wolbe writes in the name of the Chazon Ish, he says, that bas kol that came out, that proclaimed the daughter of so-and-so to so-and-so before you were born, how do you hear the bas kol? Says Rav Wolbe in the name of Chazon Ish, when you're going out and there's a feeling that this is the right one, that is the bas kol. Hashem guides you, Hashem leads you to the right one. And there's an internal sense of, it just feels right. But not mad, passionate love, not woo, just a sense of it's the right one. But the problem is that many, many times people meet the right one and keep on moving on. They pass her up for someone taller, shorter, fatter, skinnier, richer, or prettier, or whatever it may be, and you can very, very well pass up your bashert. I once had a guy who on the second round called me up and said, Rebbe, I got to talk. What's up? Going out, second round, I need to talk. But it was clear that he had a lot of things that he needed to discuss. I told him I'm very busy. I told him, listen, I'm driving to Lakewood. I'm giving a shiur on Tuesday night. You want to join me? So he drives from Brooklyn to Monsey, and together we drive to Lakewood. We have an hour and a half. And I spent the first hour listening, asking him, how do you feel? Do you enjoy our company? Do you look forward? And every time he'd answer, yes, but. Yes, I enjoy your company, but. Yes, I look forward to the dates, but. Yes, but, yes, but, yes. But finally I said, stop. Here's the problem. It's clear that there's something here. It's clear to me that you like her, that you feel comfortable. But what I don't know for sure is, do you like her and she's the right one? Or do you like her but she's not the right one? And that's what's stopping you. But the problem is, I can't tell. We need a Novi. If a Leon Novi would come down, he would tell us either she is the right one or she's not the right one, but I can't tell. And at that moment he said to me, I know she's the right one, but I'm angry at Hashem for it. I said, stop, what did you say? He said, I know she's the right one, but I'm angry at Hashem for it. And many, many people meet their bashert and pass them by. Meet the right person and say, she's not tall enough, not miyuchas enough, I need a better family, I need a better this, I could do better, I could. And they pass them by. You have that capacity to do that, you have the ability to do that, but you also have the ability to find the right one, marry that person, and potentially be happy for the rest of your life. I think this Chazal shares with us a tremendous understanding. Amnon saw Tamar and deeply, deeply desired her. Western civilization would call it love at first sight. He certainly seemed to be obsessed with her, needing her, couldn't get her out of his mind. But that wasn't love. That was infatuation. The proof in the pudding is, no sooner does he rape her than he hates her more than he supposedly loved her. He didn't love her. He was obsessed. He was taken, smitten maybe, but that's not a criteria for selection. By the way, if you're not sure that I'm right, I'll give you one simple illustration. Let's say you're a real Hollywood culturette, and you believe what they tell you, that the siman, that it's the right one, is if you fall in love, right? Isn't that how they play it, right? If it's the right one, you'll know it. What does it know it mean? I'll fall madly, passionately in love, because the fact that I fall in love with this person is the sign that this is the right one. Okay, let's play that out for a minute. I want to ask you a very simple little question. Let's imagine we got a guy who goes to work. He spent a good number of years in yeshiva, but right now it's time for him to go to work. And he's a real Ben Torah. He's kovei itim, he davens, he does everything right. And in the office, he's very serious about his work. But it happens to be, that there's a very attractive young girl there. And initially he's very guarded, very careful, doesn't even talk to her. But, they're on the same team and they're working on a project together. And, he says this and she says that. And before you know it, they're a little bit friendly. And the friendliness becomes a little bit more friendly. And before you know it, they're talking and back and forth and back and forth. And suddenly our fellow finds himself smitten, obsessed. He can't get her out of his mind. He can't stop thinking about her. He can't stop the image of her coming back. He's completely gone. Our superhero is in love. So obviously, that's his bashert, right? Obviously, that's the person he's destined to marry because he's in love with her, right? Except one little problem. Her last name is Christopher. She comes from an Italian family, and she attends church every Sunday. You could fall in love with a person who's completely inappropriate for you. Falling in love, as Western civilization likes to call infatuation, doesn't mean this is the right person for you. It's not a sign that this is your bashert. It's a sign that you're attracted. It's a sign that he's very handsome. It's a sign that she's very pretty. It's a sign that you're smitten. But it's not a sign it's the right one. And let Amnon be the biggest proof because he was so obsessed. He gave up the monarchy for this, and no sooner did he take her than poof, those feelings were gone, replaced with much stronger feelings, the exact opposite. What Yaakov Avinu was doing by bringing his grandsons close to him, hugging them and kissing, was building that bond of love. Because to build love really requires acts of love, requires time. And even though they're his grandsons, even though he loves them deeply, but doing that act brought that emotion more to the fore. Infatuation has its place. It has a very real place. Hashem created it for a reason. But it's not true love. And if you use that as a selection criteria, forget about it. Love at first sight is very good for the movies, but it's not good for marriage. It's certainly not a selection criteria. And if you say, I'm not getting married until I'm in love, I got news for you, you're not going to succeed. If you'd like to know who is the right one for you, you have to trust Hashem. You have to remember, my job is not to make the right decision. My job is to make the best decision I can. Hashem runs the world. Hashem wants me to succeed. Hashem gave me all the tools I need, and Hashem will arrange for the right one to be there in the right time. But I have to do my part. My part is to find that person. How do I find that person? The paper test. I find out in general terms, are we holding in the same place? We're looking to raise the same kind of family. Are we looking to live approximately the same kind of life? And then we take the bashert test. The bashert test is instinctive. It's intuitive. It's just a sense of, does it feel right? Does it feel comfortable? Is this the right one? When you do that, then you take your heavy load, you transfer it to Hashem, and you say, Hashem, I didn't create the world. I don't run the world. I've done my part. I took the paper test, I took the bashert test. Now I rely on you. You close your eyes and you take that leap of faith. Do you know for sure? How can you get married? It's the biggest decision in your life. How can you get married if you don't know for sure? You can't know for sure until you're married for 50 years. But your job is not to know for sure. Your job is not to make the right decision. Your job is to make the best decision you can, relying on Hashem to bring you to where you're supposed to be. I'd like to close with an example. I don't know if you'll appreciate what I feel in this example, but if you want to know what love, real love is, when Rav Pam died, the Rosh Hashiva of Torah V'das, his wife, the Rebbitzin, and they had been married for decades. Someone came to the house and saw Rebbitzin Pam at the ironing board, holding an iron. And it didn't make sense. Why is she ironing? Her husband just died. She has to do housework? And when they got closer, they saw what it was. She was ironing Rav Pam's kittel. He had to be buried in it. She wanted it to look best because she wanted the Reshiva to have the honor due to him. And when her husband died, that night she was sitting there ironing his kittel for the honor of a husband. And to me, that is but one small example of real love, dedication, giving, being more concerned for the other's good than mine. But that's not instant. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens with many, many years of giving, of dedication, of living life together. but that's not infatuation. That's not something that comes and goes. It needs constant bolstering, needs constant reinforcement, but it's very powerful. It's very real. It's something you work at, and that's one of the vital ingredients of a successful marriage. Infatuation isn't, but real love is.